Hello, welcome to China Tonight. I'm Stan Grant. On the program, we talk to legendary artist and activist Ai Weiwei. China's rapid race towards 6G. And puppy love, the boom in animals as pets. First tonight, what's making news on the platforms people use, Weibo and WeChat? Joining me is Yvonne Yong. And Yvonne, while Australia falters in the delivery of COVID vaccines, the Chinese government is claiming to have hit a remarkable number.
It has, Stan. The National Health Commission this week claimed more than 1 billion doses of vaccine have now been delivered. It's not been easy, though. From free eggs to cash rewards, authorities have tried everything to encourage residents to get the jab. China has 5 vaccines approved, all of them locally made and, like Australia, free. However, also like Australia, people online are complaining about the difficulties of making a vaccine appointment. The successful arrival of 3 Chinese astronauts to the country's own partially built space station made big news this week. China is barred from working with NASA and by extension the International Space Station, so it has been building an alternative. Besides the great technological leap forward and national pride, Chinese netizens on Weibo are also crazy about the food for those taikonauts. Not surprising at all. Apparently, they can enjoy more than 120 kinds of food, including the famous Kung Pao chicken. The hashtag Space Delivery Kung Pao chicken has more than 370 million reads. And finally, the story of the strong-willed pig is at an end. Famous in China, the pig survived the devastating Sichuan earthquake found in rubble 36 days after the disaster struck. He's become a symbol of persistence. One fan remarked, "It's not just a pig, it represents strength and not giving up." More than 500 million people read the obituary by the Jianchuan Museum, which adopted the pig. It says the strong-willed pig, as it's nicknamed, died peacefully at 14 years old due to exhaustion and old age. Press freedom in Hong Kong is in the spotlight this week. The government has accused pro-democracy newspaper Apple Daily of using journalistic work to collude with foreign countries. State media report that the paper has become a radical anti-government tool that spreads lies and makes seditious claims. Beijing's hit back at criticism from other countries as meddling. Well, last month, the paper's owner, Jimmy Lai, was sentenced to 14 months jail for his role in the 2019 protests. This week, 5 more Apple Daily executives were arrested. Hundreds of police barged into their newsroom, taking computers and servers.
The suspects have been arrested on strong evidence that they are conspiring to endanger national security.
Well, the firm's assets were frozen, disrupting cash flow and possibly forcing it to stop publishing by the end of the week. There's been a rush to buy copies of Apple Daily in case it disappears.
言論自由被收窄，普通市民都感受到呢份壓力。
咁支持返所有言論自由，係佢哋其實真係冇乜唔啱嘅嘢咁樣咯，係啦。
But Apple Daily isn't giving up just yet. The paper says Hong Kong still needs the truth and they'll keep fighting for press freedom. Beijing has warned Chinese nationals to leave Afghanistan as soon as possible. There's been a rapid rise of violence in the country as the Taliban moves to recapture territory before a complete withdrawal of US and NATO troops. China's embassy urged its citizens to be more cautious and urgently depart the country. It's blamed the surge in attacks on the abrupt withdrawal of American forces after nearly 20 years there. Continuous downpours across parts of China has seen more than 20 rivers burst their banks and caused widespread flooding. More than 200 millimetres of rain fell in Kaijiang County in the southwest province of Sichuan. Some residents had to be rescued. In the north, floodwaters breached a river levee in the Inner Mongolia Autonomous Region, forcing firefighters to work through the night.
经过连夜抢险，截至今天上午10时，累计排除险段一处，装沙袋7000余袋，加固堤坝300余米。
And in the eastern province of Zhejiang, a dam near Hangzhou city overflowed. Weather forecasters say there's a lot more rain to come this week. Officials are urging special flood prevention efforts in affected areas to avoid a repeat of last year when the flood season was the worst on record. And lastly, Stan, there are unconfirmed reports that China's top counterintelligence official, Dong Jingwei, has defected to the United States. According to American intelligence publication Spy Talk, Mr. Jingwei supposedly gave US officials information about the origins of COVID-19. There has been no official word from either Beijing or Washington about this, and Chinese media, although reporting that he's made recent speeches and attended conferences, have not made a mention of his current whereabouts, Stan.
Well, Yvonne, rumours of defection are not uncommon, are they? Earlier this year, there was talk that the scientist at the centre of the Wuhan lab leak theory, Shi Jiangli, had defected, and they proved to be false.
Yes, Stan, and this one could be too. But if proven true, Mr. Jingwei would be the highest level official ever to have defected from China to the US.
Chinese households are projected to host around 755 million domestic pets by next year, but keeping animals as pets has a complex history in a country founded in Buddhism and forged by famine. Just last year, the government declared dogs would now be classified as pets, not food. Regardless, the controversial annual Lai Chi and Dog Meat Festival in Yulin is underway again this month. That festival promotes the local dog meat industry, which persists despite the efforts of animal rights campaigners. Annie Louey has more.
The year was 1996. A little kid accompanied her mum on their first trip to China together. Their rural hometown was covered in fields that had animals like chickens and pigs. Most families in the village even owned an ox. The child received 2 white rabbits to play with, which she adored. After returning to Australia, the 4-year-old would talk to her relatives over the phone to ask how her rabbits were doing. The relatives always said they were doing well.
But they lied. The rabbits were long gone as they'd been cooked for food. And yep, you guessed it, that little kid was me. Even at that very young age, I'd applied my Western view of certain animals as pets without knowing that traditionally Chinese people have kept animals for work and food.
It was only last year that the Chinese government reclassified dogs as pets instead of livestock. The Agriculture Ministry said the progress of human civilization and the public's concern and love for animals led to the decision. Some of the mistreatment towards animals is a legacy of Mao Zedong's Cultural Revolution. In the mid-1960s, keeping dogs as pets was banned. It was seen as an activity for the bourgeoisie, or Western capitalist elites, and they claimed dogs were consuming too much of the nation's limited food supplies. I first met my cousin Zan on my first trip to China. Despite once owning a fish jumper, Zan grew up to be a passionate dog lover. She now runs a dog training business in Guangdong that accepts 8 dogs a month for lessons.
以前呢，像我们农村，狗狗是作为看门口的，就是说看家护院的。还有人是把自己家养的狗狗当肉来吃狗肉。但是这几年呢，因为我们宣传了很多养狗文化，所以很多人现在是把狗狗当自己的小孩子一样来养，不是说像以前那种方式了。
Zan finds most of her clients on Douyin, China's TikTok, where she has 160,000 followers.
Turns out, I'm not the only celebrity in the family.
Zan says the most popular breeds include golden retrievers and poodles.
从早上基本是24小时，我们的生活都是对着狗狗的。但是狗狗呢，是可以给我们带来很多快乐的。
Pet ownership is certainly booming in China. The pet dog population is growing at 9.9% per year. The popularity of cats is growing too, at an even faster rate of 18.5%, followed by fish, small mammals, birds and reptiles. Pei Su, CEO of the not-for-profit organisation Act Asia, says some people are treating animals as the latest accessory.
Although the animal lovers are growing and the cruelty cases are more prominent to be recognised, the fundamental problem is seeing animals as a resource and an object. That is one of our biggest obstacles.
China changed the laws around animal welfare after the pandemic. What do you know about that?
The pandemic highlighted the seriousness of the wildlife trade, how we loss of the biodiversity and the loss of habitat for these animals, and also the trade in the live market. And one of the most significant change through the pandemic in 2020 in China was the wildlife consumption was banned. However, unfortunately, the animals, particularly wildlife, they're not only just using in the as a food, as consumption, they also use for clothing, like fur. They're also still using for entertainment.
However, Pei warns against adopting Western models and applying them to China.
Not everything in the West are the good, thing for Asia. If we want to learn, we need to internalize it. We need to have a step to make it as suitable for its local context.
Turns out it's a misconception to assume that China is simply catching up with the West when it comes to pet ownership and animal welfare. In Buddhism, it teaches us respect for all beings, humans and animals alike.
Inspired by Buddhist teachings, artist Feng Zikai famously depicted harmony between humans and animals in his cartoon series Paintings for the Preservation of Life in 1929, decades before the Cultural Revolution.
It's clear attitudes towards animals in China is changing massively. And if you want to get emotionally attached to a small, fluffy animal, now is a much better time than 1996. I'll never leave you.
And Annie, when we talk about animal rights, there's another issue that's been getting a lot of attention. It's these mystery animal boxes. What are they?
Yes, so it's been going crazy on social media, mostly the outrage around this news story, which is people have been able to order mystery boxes online, and usually they contain a collectible item. You can imagine in Australia, supermarkets were doing something similar. People went crazy for it, except they were including live animals as part of the things that they were sending out via the mail. And it is illegal in China for you to send live animals out, except authorities haven't really been able to crack down on this yet. So it's really been on social media that people are calling for the government to change the regulations and to be harsher, because you might not know this, but there is not one single law that protects animals in general as a whole in China when it comes to this.
So what can be done from here? So you're talking about changes to law, and can the campaign on social media bring about this change?
I've found that there has been a lot of smaller organisations working on animal welfare issues in China, but it seems like there isn't a very large one like RSPCA that we have here in Victoria. So it's like they really do need to get their act together in order to work together so that these organisations can educate. And also one of the people that I spoke to, Pei, she is working on education with children in particular. So it's a mix of things, not just social media, but also working with those communities on the ground.
Annie, thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Artist and activist Ai Weiwei is known the world over for his provocative works of art. His sculptures, photographs, documentaries and public works are instantly recognisable. In fact, his Bird's Nest Stadium, the centrepiece for the 2008 Beijing Games, became a visual representation of modern China. But China's most famous artist has come under fire from Chinese authorities for criticising the government. In 2011, he was detained for 3 months by Chinese authorities on charges of tax evasion. In 2015, he left the country, but he continues to criticise the regime. He joins me now from Portugal. Ai Weiwei, it's a pleasure to have you on the program. You were once described as the most important artist in the world. What does that mean to you, and what are people looking for in your art?
I think it gave me a lot of responsibility, and I don't not only just manage my personal activities, but rather to think about aesthetics, moral, and philosophical questions in relating to our time.
When you look at your place in the world, particularly at this time in China, with China's rising power, what are your responsibilities, do you think, as an artist, inside China and outside the country?
I think as an artist, I'm privileged to defend the freedom of expression. You know, this is, I find my purpose, to my life's purpose to struggle and to forcefully push those values ahead.
But of course, you've paid an enormous cost for your activism and your art. You've been detained, you've been arrested, you're outside of the country now, your mother, elderly mother, is still inside the country and you can't visit. Has this been worth the cost that you've paid?
I think, yes, if there's a so-called freedom, there's always a struggle. Based on struggle, freedom is just an illusion. I paid some price, but not that much compared to many people still spend their lifetime in jail, some even dead in jail. And compared to my father's generation, millions of intellectuals being punished, put in re-education camps. And what I have been paid is nothing.
Do you believe that the Chinese Communist Party, as it increasingly cracks down, we see a more authoritarian face to the party, that it is winning right now against the voices of dissent?
I think the Chinese government definitely is winning and have a huge victory in terms of purge all the people, whoever has different ideas. And they are not just winning at this time, they have been winning since 1949.
So what does that say about your activism, the activism of others, that in spite of that, the party can be, in your words, winning this battle?
I think the battle is a self-battle. It's by doing so, I'm learning and I'm educating myself what is the meaning of my life, and if that have any purpose or functioning. You know, I'm not sure the battle for China or for even to make the change is possible, but certainly it's very meaningful for myself.
Do you think that the increasing criticism coming from the West now towards China is going to lead to more confrontation? How is the West handling this moment of China's rise?
I think at least a few signs showed, you know, first, U.S. no longer, or the West no longer feel dominated the political landscape or economic control. And they will constantly meet the challenge from China, or not even more from other nations, maybe India or some other nations. And they have to accept more or change their own principles. So that is to say, because the West is not in a dominant position anymore, so there will be a lot of argument and negotiations. I don't know about a wartime or, you know, but certainly China is not afraid to have a war. I think China is always prepared.
Ai Weiwei, can we turn now to some of your art? I want to look particularly at your role in the 2008 Olympics and the Bird's Nest Stadium, something that you are obviously very intricately involved in, and yet something that became very much a symbol of Chinese Communist Party power. When you reflect back on that, how do you feel about the way that your work there has been represented?
Before the Olympics, 1 year before that, I already realized that will be a source of propaganda for nationalism and glorify the Communist Party. And but still, the building, the architecture is very bold and designed for freedom. You can see this clearly even entrance and no decoration, and the structure is very strong and clear. And so probably the best architecture ever in terms in you know, interpret the mass movement of any event. But still, this it doesn't really function well because it often be used as to glorify the Communist Party's achievement. That's very ironic.
It's interesting again that you use the word freedom when you describe what you wanted that Bird's Nest Stadium to represent. And it raises the question about just how, in the face of the control of the Chinese Communist Party, freedom is still alive in China. Do you believe that that desire for freedom is still alive in the people?
I think the spirit of the freedom never exists. It's not alive or not. It never exists. It may exist in a few individuals, but never really exist. And what Chinese Communist parties use nationalism, or or a strong party control to really eat away individualism or freedom. But nothing left.
Can I finish on another famous work of art of yours, and that is the sunflowers? How did you mean for that to be represented? What do you think about the various interpretations of it? And I wonder if you're not making a bigger statement here about China and a hope for a future of China that you'd like to see.
Well, all this over 100 million of sunflower seeds come from individuals' hand. It's painted by individuals, mostly women, and it's with very carefulness, with some kind of traditional way to make those high quality porcelains, and they all look the same, but they're all different.
And that says something too about China.
Yes, it reflects certain quality. China still has a strong culture being an individual, and but same times it looks almost like all the same.
Ai Weiwei, it's been a pleasure to have you on the program. Thank you again.
Thank you. 谢谢你.
Where is Jack Ma?
Don't try to be the best, be the first.
"但是中国的问题，我认为正好相反。我们的当铺思想要依靠信用体系的发展。没人炸弹，哪敢扔炸弹？今年因为疫情的原因啊，我们不能在三亚见面。
6G technology, a pipe dream perhaps to the Australian market, but development is well and truly underway in China. Geopolitics is fueling a growing technological rivalry between the US and China, and 6G is the latest front. Chinese tech giant Huawei is reportedly set to launch 2 satellites next month to test its tech, and Beijing says it could be operational by 2030. With Australia yet to complete the rollout of 5G, Samuel Young has gone in search of answers.
我知道 WiFi 它是悉尼大学发明的，所以当时就觉得心里很有一个这样的念想，想来澳大利亚去学习通信工程。
While the invention story of Wi-Fi isn't quite that straightforward, Lina Li had high hopes when she arrived here to study, but she was soon having a very typical Australian experience.
喂，妈。 或者是我跟我父母在视频的时候，用微信在视频的时候，上面就会提示，您的网络质量不佳。然后我妈妈那边就会提示对方网络质量不佳。在我们中国留学生的圈子里面，经常会吐槽澳洲的网络就是很龟速。
So is Australia really that bad, or is China just leaping ahead? China has the largest 5G network in the world and some of the fastest internet speeds on the planet. And it plans to have 6G technology up and running by 2030. I know, most of us here don't even have 5G. So what even is 6G? I took a little tour of Australia's most advanced 6G research centre at the University of Sydney to find out.
Oh, it will be like in science fiction world, integration of human brains with computers. We will have swarms of robots at homes doing various domestic tasks.
Okay, now I'm paying attention, but I still don't know what it is.
The 6G is just a communication network that brings together all other devices and all other technologies.
So the difference between 6G and older cellular networks will be the type of wavelengths used to transmit data. 6G could use terahertz waves, which may be as much as 100 times faster than 5G.
A network would be able to support many more connections within a certain area than 5G.
If you are still a little confused, let's look at an example. Self-driving cars need to communicate very quickly with each other and with their environment to prevent crashes and stay on the road. Something 5G technology hasn't quite been able to do. So if devices are able to communicate with each other more quickly, our tech dreams could become tech realities.
We develop here the theoretical framework for 6G.
And while the work being done here is impressive, researchers in China are racing ahead. Liftoff. This rocket, launched from China's Taiwan space station in November last year, is carrying a very special payload, the world's first 6G test satellite. The technology was also included as a priority in China's latest 5-year plan, and tech giant Huawei has plans for other 6G test satellites in the near future. And while Beijing says the technology will be used for smart city construction, disaster prevention, and environmental protection, a People's Liberation Army document confirmed that China is investigating the use of 6G in its military.
Well, the Chinese government is locked in a battle for technological supremacy with the United States for all sorts of strategic, political and military purposes. China is not close to winning that technological struggle, but China is determined to invest in every new technology that might have widespread application in the economy and in military operations.
America is back.
In April, the US and Japan announced a joint investment of $5.8 billion for research into 6G.
The bill is passed.
And the US government has just passed a sweeping new bill for more research and innovation funding to try and stave off China's tech challenge.
Now, many other countries started to invest in 6G because they realized they were lagging behind China.
Flying DeLorean?
But for most of us, we just want the robots and the flying cars.
Thank you for your cooperation. Good night.
And that's all we have on this week's show. Next week, Made in China, the big push to boost locally manufactured goods as rising wages drive producers offshore. And for more on China, you can download China If You're Listening on the ABC Listen app or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Stan Grant. Have a good night.